We're good to go, Margaret.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Well, good morning or afternoon or evening to everyone. My name is Margaret Myers, and I direct the Asia and Latin America program at the Inter-American Dialogue. I am very pleased to welcome you all on behalf of the Inter-American Dialogue and the Japan Association of Latin America and the Caribbean, or JILAC, which has been our longstanding partner in our events on Japan, Latin America, and Caribbean relations over the years. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And allow me to extend an especially warm welcome to our panelists and participants who are joining from different time zones, including very late at night and in Tokyo. So thank you so much for being here. Before turning the floor to the Dialogue's president, Rebecca Bill Chavez, for a quick welcome, allow me to note that simultaneous interpretation into both Spanish and Japanese is available to those who are joining us on Zoom. You can access that by clicking on the interpretation link at the bottom of your screen and then selecting your preferred language channel. Also, following some brief remarks from our panelists, the second half of our event will be dedicated to questions and answers from our Q&A with our audience. And throughout the event, we encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature, again, at the bottom of your screen, or by emailing them to meetings@thedialogue.org. That's meetings with an S. And with that, Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Margaret. On behalf of the Inter-American Dialogue and the Japan Association of Latin America and the Caribbean, it is my great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and participants. And as Margaret said, especially to those of you who are joining us very late at night or very early in the morning, thank you so much to everyone for being here. The Dialogue is delighted to continue our now 8-year-long partnership with JILAC, aimed at highlighting developments in the longstanding Japan-Latin America relationship. As we'll discuss today, Japan's work in support of Central America and the Caribbean development objectives, whether directly or in collaboration with regional or extra-regional partners and platforms, could be quite transformative as these regions aim to recover from the varied and evolving impacts of the pandemic and to address longstanding development needs. Allow me to extend a very big thank you to our sponsors, Sumitomo Corporation, Toyota Shusho, Mitsubishi Corporation, and ERM, for helping make today's discussion and last week's private roundtable possible, and to also make them, of course, a success. And thank you to you too, Margaret. We are deeply grateful for your generous support of our events and of the Dialogue JILAC partnership. I, for one, am looking forward to an excellent discussion today. And with that, let me give a warm welcome to Maki Kobayashi, the esteemed Director General of the Latin America and Caribbean Affairs Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, for welcoming remarks. Director General, we are thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Thank you very much, Ms. Chavez, Ms. Myers. Good morning and good night to all. I would like to thank Inter-American Dialogue and JILAC to co-organize this seminar. I'm particularly thrilled to talk about evolving engagement in reference to Prime Minister Abe's Juntos initiative, which I worked for under the leadership of Ambassador Yamada, who also participates in this seminar. We all have suffered, as mentioned by Rebecca at the outset from the pandemic, and we're working under new normal circumstances for recovery. The Russian aggression to Ukraine hit us and impacted the economy, and more broadly, governance of the international community. LAC countries were most affected by the pandemic and subsequent crisis, hiking price of food and fuel, and as well as cost of transportation due to supply chain disruptions, but especially for those who are scarce in resources like Central America and the Caribbean, societal and economic impact have been larger. Also, due to climate change, hurricane comes more often than before. Facing these even more challenging situations, I would like to emphasize 3 points here at the outset. Together with our partners in the region, we will reinforce resilience of the society. We will reinforce growth in the economy. we will reinforce secure international environment. Resilience of the society have been something we have been always putting importance on in our relations with Central America and the Caribbean. Well, I think our colleagues from JICA will talk about it later, but they have been working extensively. We also work closely, as mentioned by Rebecca, with JICA, CARICOM, PAFO, IDB. Maybe we can explore more with CDB as well. As we made decision in 2014 for the first time, we continue to provide cooperation considering each country's respective situation and not solely upon GDP per capita. We provided grant aid to 25 countries for assisting medical and sanitary equipment and system building, including also those who are usually not eligible for grant aid. For growth, we need more private sector involvement. In this sense, although pandemic and Russian aggression caused many damages, at the same time raised awareness of importance of availability, credibility, and political risk in order to secure supply chain. Many more companies are shifting towards reassuring, nearshoring, or friendshoring to manage risks. As pointed out, we have less cases for investment in Central America and the Caribbean in the paper. But on one hand, we have some long-standing investment which can give a good model for other interested companies. On the other hand, some other companies have made decisions for reinvestment or recent decisions to enter, as we will hear later from the panelists, which also give good precedents to be shared. Recent crisis also pushed us further in our digitalization, which is essential for sustainable and inclusive growth. As digital society will come into details of individual secure system to protect private or company information is even more important. So Japanese companies are very much interested in investing for secure digital society, holding seminars and ready to cooperate closely. Green transformation is also indispensable for our sustainable future, and the use of affordable renewable energy, solar, geothermal, some smaller hydropower is important for resource-scarce countries like Central America, Caribbean, and Japan. In fact, attracting investment is always challenging, but as I mentioned, we have good practices to highlight. And also US initiative like Call to Action or America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity will surely attract Japanese investors already in the region. Reinforce our international environment and its governance is also something we should work together. For all those purposes, the dialogues are most important to advance agenda and follow-ups to put into actions. We have been engaging dialogues not only bilaterally, but also through JICA with Central America and CARICOM with the Caribbean. July last year, then Minister Motegi went to the region and had Japan JICA ministerial and Japan CARICOM ministerial and bilaterals. Now the state minister in Argentina to participate in ECLAT assembly and in the margin meet with various ministers. Our vice ministers went to Belize and Trinidad and Tobago in June, went to Antigua Barbuda and met with 6 Eastern Caribbean ministers in October, and also visited Jamaica at the same time. We are planning other visits in coming months ahead. We received ministers from El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, and Jamaica in October for the state funeral for late Prime Minister Abe, and soon in November, maybe Costa Rica. We continue this engagement. For that process, I am, and we are, very much looking forward to today's discussions for our policy making to be able to respond better to what are necessary on the ground. Thank you for your kind attention. And back to you, Mr. Chavez and Ms. Myers.
Thank you so much for your expert help setting the scene for this important discussion, Director General. Very much appreciated, including, of course, reference to the very critical external factors that are shaping this dynamic. Let's now delve a bit deeper even into the topic of the day, which is, of course, Japan's engagement, prospects for enhanced engagement and existing engagement with the Central American and Caribbean regions. As was alluded to earlier, we're fortunate to be able to hold a roundtable meeting on this topic just a week ago, where we were joined by over 30 experts on various aspects of Japan-Latin America relations. During that event, as we'll do here today also, we considered the extent to which these two regions, the Caribbean and Central America, have and will continue to feature in Japan's future engagement with the region, considering that much of Japan's commercial activity remains focused in other parts of the region, frequently South America, for example. But as noted by Director General Kobayashi, there is already extensive engagement underway and many prospects for more in the way of cooperation in various areas. And indeed, late Prime Minister Abe's Juntos policy, which we've covered in depth in other sessions on Japan-Latin America relations, has been focused on the region as a whole. Participants, I'll say just a quick summary of one or two key findings. Participants were generally optimistic about prospects for enhanced collaboration on climate, in particular, which really dominated the discussion. But also food security, employment, education, digital and financial services, and wide-ranging other areas where some of the organizations represented here today have indeed already focused and will tell us a bit about their own engagements in these spaces. We also considered the possibility of new Japanese cooperation on Caribbean and Central American engagement with, the Inter-American Development Bank, where Japan is already strongly engaged, CARICOM, where again there is also partnership, and even CABE, where South Korea and Taiwan are quite active in development projects, and then also in collaboration with certain UN agencies. There are, of course, some obstacles, right, to enhanced engagement, including the classification of many of the countries in these regions as middle-income countries, which in many ways limits some of the participation, some of the engagement that can take place. Japan's private sector must also consider market conditions when planning future investment, but as we'll hear, public-private partnerships with JICA have created opportunities for certain companies to partner with these countries in novel ways. We have today assembled an exceptional group of panelists, all with different areas of focus, but who together can help us to consider the nature of Japanese engagement in the Caribbean and Central American regions at present, as well as prospects for enhanced engagement in the coming months and years in support of specific development objectives and through certain platforms or partnerships. In the interest of time, I won't read each of their extensive bios, but allow me to very briefly introduce first Kota Sakaguchi, who is the director of the Central America and Caribbean Division at the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. Thank you so much for being here. Marco Lopez is Chief Operating Officer at Partnership for Central America. Ayesha Constable is National Coordinator of the Japan-Caribbean Climate Change Partnership, which, as I understand it, has evolved of late, and you can update us on that, Ayesha. Also joining us is Elvis Motobayashi, the Executive Vice President of Yazaki North America Incorporated. And then last but certainly not least, Jonathan Casey is Chief Integration Officer of Nisha Medical Technologies, which is of course active in much of the region. And so with that, Mr. Sakaguchi, could you start us off with a general sense of Japan's and specifically JICA's activities in these regions at present?
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret. So can I share the document? No, not yet. No, I cannot hear. Maybe you mute. Yep. You do. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for very good opportunity for us. So I'm Kota Sakaguchi, director in charge of Central America and the Caribbean region, 23 country in the region. So next, please. Yeah, today just speak. So I only have the few minutes, so I explain about JICAs and some figures in the region. And so JICA is the Japanese ODA administrating and implementing agency. So next, please. Yeah, so JICA implements several activities in 148 developing countries, and we have 96 overseas offices and 15 domestic offices. Next, please. Yep. So JICA's modalities. So we have mainly six modalities: the technical cooperation, and loan and investment, and grant aids, and disaster relief, PPP, public-private partnerships, and citizens participation, including JICA volunteers. And recently, in terms of the disaster relief, we provide relief to several Central American countries, including Honduras, Guatemala, and Cuba. So next, please. Okay, so this is a figure, a record budget implemented in 2021. So of course, Asia, we have the so huge budgets to that region, and Middle East and Europe is kind of similar budget to Latin America and the Caribbean. But Africa, actually, normally Africa's budget execution or implementation is much higher than Latin America and the Caribbean. But 2021, since our financial cooperation project going very well, so we have this good amount of the budget is implemented. So it is more or less 1.2 billion US dollar. Next, please. Yep. So our pillars. So we have the 7 pillars: free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP, responding to COVID-19 and recoveries, and climate change and global environment. And nation building is peace building is similar like human resource development, and digital transformation, science and technology is important, and internationalization of Japanese local community. So this is one element that we are working, and gender and diversities. Next, please. Okay. And some figures in this region. So countries in operation, 23. So all Central American countries, and Mexico, and all Caribbean countries, all CARICOM countries. So including Guyana and Suriname. And we have 13 offices here: Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Lucia. And also, as Director General Kobayashi mentioned, we work together with JICA and CARICOM. So we already dispersed several experts to that JICA and the CARICOM institution, and we will dispatch the expert to CARICOM headquarters and next January. And our experts in 2021, so we dispatched 153 experts, and training received 785, including online knowledge co-creation program and JICA's training. But so 785 is 20 record in 2021. So next, please. And projects, so technical cooperation project, we have 60 ongoing activities, and so including 37 technical cooperation projects in the region. And also we are receiving, we just received 20 or more new requests, and if it will be approved, so next year we will start that 20 or 20 some project. And Rome, in that region, historically or traditionally, we do not have, did not have much project in the region. So, but last year we approved 3 projects, 2 in Dominican Republic and 1 in Honduras. And also this year we approved the project in El Salvador, and 3 projects is under appraisal and formulation process. So currently our loan project is increasing this region. And granted, so we approved 3 projects, and so 2 projects and the other new project under formulation in 2022. And PPP activities we implemented or we prepared 39 partnerships project, including PPP joint studies and JICA investment program. And also volunteers. Soon after the pandemic occurs, and all volunteers in the region go back to Japan. But now we re-dispatch those volunteers, and that program is now restarted. So already 11 countries, so we dispatch the volunteers to 11 countries. So next, please. Some projects. So the first one is mathematical education. So we've been working with Central American country more than 30 years for improving the mathematical education. So the creating the textbook and the improvement of the quality of the education. And second one is quality infrastructure development. And so Panama Metro Third Line project is the biggest one, so which is more than 2.5 billion US dollars project. And also El Salvador San Miguel bypass road is just approved for the second phase. And several bridge construction projects in the region. And we are working with the JICA, the JICA's institution, regarding Central American Logistics Master Plan. And disaster prevention, so this historically we implement many projects, and we have the community-based disaster management, Taishin project, Gensai projects, and also we dispatch in the SEDEMA in Barbados, disaster management advisor. And community policy is one of the flagship in the region, but since I don't have much time, so next page, please. And health sector. So before the pandemic and under the with and of course post pandemic, so we implement several or many projects in health sector. And so we did many COVID recovery projects, and we are still formulating new projects in terms of the nutrition or NCDs measures. And startup ecosystem co-creation is kind of the key activities in this time. And we have the Tsubasa project with the IDB Lab, which is transformational startups business acceleration for the SDGs agenda. So this program is we will start next month. We'll start the second term of the Tsubasa. And also agricultural development is a key issue. So we implement several food value chain projects, and we are now doing the food value chain finance study in Central America and the Caribbean region. Also, renewable energy, also green economy is one of the key elements of our cooperation. And so we implement loan project, technical cooperation project, and the region-wide technical cooperation project. So the next will be last slide. Yep. Sorry, this letter is very tiny, but we are working together with U.S. government to address the root causes of the undocumented immigration in Central America. So this we have the several activities in this region, and so this is the one of the key activity what jointly U.S. and Japan is working. Okay, so time is up. So thank you very much. So next, please. Next and next. Yep. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you have any question, please write in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. Get back to you, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sakaguchi. That was extremely helpful, and I think a perfect segue into our next presentation, especially as concerns U.S. and Japanese cooperation on the root causes of undocumented migration. Mark, we'd love to know your thoughts on prospects for further Japan-U.S. collaboration and where interests may indeed intersect. So please.
Thank you, Margaret, and thanks to the dialogue and Rebecca and Michael for always hosting world-class events like this. So very much appreciate bringing us together. So the Partnership for Central America was launched in the context and simultaneously with Vice President Harris's call to action for U.S. companies to invest in Central America, particularly El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. So our focus is narrowly with those countries. We have essentially two mandates. And just to start off, we're an independent 501c3 based out of Washington. We're a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We don't receive government money either from the US government or from governments in the region. So that allows us to have some independence to carry out our work. We are funded privately through philanthropic donations and through some of our corporate partners. So we have essentially two mandates. One is to mobilize and coordinate private sector investment to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. That could be from US companies, from regional companies, from companies around the world. So just to hit the punchline, we welcome additional Japanese investment, Japanese government coordination, Japanese company investment, and very much look forward to continuing this conversation. So one element is the mobilization and coordination of that private investment. Today, we have over $3 billion of investment committed over the next 5 years to those countries. We translate that dollar figure into impact. So jobs, farmers, people connected to the internet, people banked, and people skilled narrowly for a job. Those are our kind of 5 impact metrics. We also have cross-cutting programs on gender and rule of law. The Vice President announced an In Her Hands initiative at the Summit of the Americas last year, and we are following up on that. The second piece of what we do is, now that we have this very interesting table set of key stakeholders for this region, and that's with the partnerships memorandum of understanding with the IDB, the World Bank, USAID, the Department of State, and of course, a close collaboration with the Vice President's office. We're also working closely with the CAF and CABE, and of course, all 3 governments in the region. That, with the private sector team that has made commitments, the brands you all know, Microsoft, MasterCard, Visa, Nespresso, Cargill, Pepsi. I could go on, and I'm sorry I can't read the full list. But that now table looks very interesting to bring scaled ideas to work together in consortiums across pillars to try to move things to happen. We're a small organization. We frankly are focused on the large ideas and know that as we put these ideas on the table and try to move them, not all of them are going to succeed. We are okay with that. Our spirit is we're happy to fail on large ideas that have never been tried before. We don't want to fail on small ideas that have failed previously. So just to give some examples of the work that we're doing on that consortium side of the house. So the Central American Service Corps is a large-scale civic work program based on AmeriCorps. That was launched by the Vice President as a key initiative of hers in the Summit of the Americas earlier this year. That has close to $100 million of financing already behind it, both from the US government as well as from private philanthropy led by the Howard Buffett Foundation. And that has thousands of youth in it already across the 3 countries, and they're scaling up rapidly to provide cash transfers, civic work of substance for young people across the countries, to provide them an immediate sense of stability and then a follow-on job. And we're helping to connect to the private sector in the region to help make those linkages. Another one is an investment fund that we're looking to launch across the region that is focused on agriculture and gender. Another one is a financial inclusion consortium with all the remittance companies and the local banks to see what we can do there. I've looked very closely at disaster risk financing, and in about 3 weeks, we're going to launch at the COP an initiative for disaster risk financing across all 2 million small farmers. This is in collaboration with the World Bank and the World Food Program. That's essentially an idea that has worked at scale. We want to scale it up across all 3 countries and across all the vulnerable populations to provide that as an option. It'll be a multi-donor trust fund. We'd have to raise money to put into that fund, but that is something that we're building. Today, Yazaki is a partner of the Call to Action. We're very happy to have them part of this effort. We think that there's a lot of additional work that can be done in the manufacturing space, in energy, and we're working with those industries as well to see what we can do as a group. And let me stop there and just say thank you again for the work. We welcome additional company interest. They can reach out directly to me or through our website at centampartnership.org. And we're always here available to be helpful. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mark, and also for your reference to some of the Japanese partners that you've already worked with on some of this. Many congrats also on the extensive progress so far. Let's now turn to Ayesha, whose work would appear to embody Japan-Caribbean cooperation. Ayesha, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Good morning. Ohayou gozaimasu. Konbanwa. My name is Ayesha Constable, and I take great pleasure in being able to contribute to this dialogue because I will reiterate again what I said in the private dialogue. I consider myself to be a beneficiary of the multiple ways in which Japan has supported Caribbean development through interactions with JICA volunteers, through having participated and lived in Japan on the JET program, and more recently having been a part of the coordinating team for the Japan-Caribbean Climate Change Partnership Project, which is just one of the many ways in which Japan has supported specifically climate resilience building in the Caribbean. And through that regional initiative, I believe that we saw some very concrete and tangible benefits in terms of rural development and empowerment of women and youth, and really building on opportunities for addressing climate vulnerabilities, particularly around the changing rainfall situation and drought, increased drought severity in parts of the Caribbean. We saw as well the introduction of aquaculture and aquaponics in some parts of the region. There were farmers who were able to participate in a study tour to Japan, to see some of the best practices in terms of agricultural development in Japan, and they came back to the region and implemented those ideas. And so I believe that we saw successes in that initiative, which have the potential to be built on as we go forward. That project ended, but then we segued into what is now Engender, which is a disaster-oriented project. And that initiative seeks to address the integration of gender considerations in both climate resilience building and disaster management. And so Engender was developed before COVID. So we have this kind of pre-COVID trajectory that we were on, and thinking that everything would have gone smoothly. We could not have anticipated what COVID meant. And I believe that now we're at a point in time where we're seeing what we call the confluence of the climate crisis, the global conflicts that are emerging, the 3 C's: conflicts, COVID, and climate change. I believe that Japan is well placed to continue to support the region in the many ways that it has, but through a lens of recognizing what the new and emerging threats are in the Caribbean. We see where I would call it a superimposition of these global threats on what are the worsening realities in some of the countries across the Caribbean. Increasing poverty, chronic poverty, and what I call feminization of poverty, increased challenges in terms of crime situation in some of our countries. Jamaica, an example I'll highlight, that is one of our key domestic and social ills, as well as infrastructural challenges, infrastructural decay. Mr. Sagaguchi-san spoke to JICA's involvement in the health sector. And I think COVID highlighted for us the vulnerabilities to the health sector and the need to develop, technologies and infrastructure to enhance or capacity to deal with similar health shocks. In terms of the opportunities for support with Japan's involvement, I want to highlight three particular areas. So food security, again, an issue highlighted through COVID. A lot of households went hungry throughout the pandemic. In many countries of the Caribbean, we are highly dependent on remittances to supplement household incomes. Those remittances were not forthcoming during the pandemic, and so many households went hungry, rural households in particular. And so there are opportunities for upscaling, technologies that can support agricultural development, particularly for rural development as well, for the benefit of women in rural communities, opportunities to help Caribbean countries with developing plant technologies and plant varieties that are more resilient to changing climatic conditions, drought resistant, pest resistant. These are areas I know Japan is well placed to lend support. In the fisheries industry as well, we see changes in our outputs and harvests in the fisheries sector because of climate change as well. And so fisheries, but more broadly, I'd say opportunities for expanding in the blue economy sector, for examining the ideas and innovations that can be capitalized in that area. Education, I'd also like to highlight that because, again, another area that COVID really dealt a huge blow on it throughout the Caribbean, where because of limited internet connectivity in many households across our countries, many children were not able to access what was seen as the solution to the discontinuation of face-to-face classes. We had online classes, but in many households, there were no smartphones, or, a mother may have, a lot of our households are headed by single women. A mother may have one smartphone and 3 children, and it just was not sufficient to allow for kids to participate in online classes. And in the Caribbean, we can ill afford to have any losses in education, to be honest. And so there are opportunities, I believe, for supporting increased internet connectivity across our households and more economical opportunities as well. We have internet companies, of course, but in some instances, the low-income households cannot afford to access what is available. And so if more affordable technologies can be developed to connect these households, I believe that would go a long way in helping with that issue. And also the matter of the just transition that we are embarking on as part of, this wave of climate resilience building in response to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Many of the countries in the Caribbean would have submitted revised nationally determined contributions very recently to the UNFCCC. And these nationally determined contributions outline the targets that we are embarking on or are working towards for the phasing out of fossil fuels. Mr. Earl Jarrett from Jamaica, and I think in the private call, highlighted the fact that one of the big ways in which Japan and Jamaica, for example, partners, and I think much of the Caribbean, is around the used car industry. And so in light of this shift towards what we call, the phase out of fossil fuels and just transition, how do we then take stock of the realities, again, of poverty, the educational challenges in our regions as we do this? How do we develop technologies that are pro-poor, that, poor people and women, I want to add again, can afford these technologies that are being developed? Again, I believe that the technologies and the ideas and capacities rather that the Japanese have in this area would suit the Caribbean very well in terms of opportunities for partnership in and around the conversations around the just transition as part of our mitigation efforts in response to climate change. In terms of wrapping, I want to say that we're mindful that the idea of investments and profit-driven contributions and interventions are always going to be priority. But I want to highlight that in terms of the size of our economies and the size of our populations, it may not be the ideal way in which we can be supported. And so, investors and supporters have to be appreciate the fact that some of the ways in which you support have to be just around public good, contributing in ways that help to transform the lived realities of the communities that you're trying to serve in the Caribbean without being able to consider bottom line and what do we get from this. I believe Japan has an excellent track record of supporting in such a way that is pro-democracy, that is respecting of local cultures and ideas and belief systems, and also in a way that has a very low ecological footprint. And I think that's an excellent way in which Japan can continue to support. If I can be a little bit contentious, I will say that we've seen in recent times a shift towards bilateral interventions that are a little bit off-putting. I will use that term for some of the people who occupy the spaces I work in. And so we look forward to seeing, an expansion of Japanese involvement in the Caribbean that brings with it the brand of Japanese support that respects people and cultures and supports the environment, the natural environment, and the social and cultural environments that you contribute to. And I say that not so much as an expert, but as a proud Caribbean national who wants to see the continued enhancement of our societies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayesha, for those excellent points and comments on the many opportunities that I think abound here, right? But also on the need to proceed with caution to avoid any unintended negative externalities. So thank you so very much for that. And I imagine we'll have a lot of questions for you and the others in the Q&A. Let's move on now to Mr. Motobayashi. Our two final panelists are here to provide some details on their company's activities in the region and any prospects for expansion. So Mr. Motobayashi, we look forward to your commentary.
Okay, thank you for introduction, Margaret. My name is Motobayashi, Elvis Motobayashi, responsible for the Office of the President at Yazaki, North America, in charge of corporate strategy, government and public affairs, and others. Taking this opportunity, let me explain about our company, as well as our activities in Central America. Next page, please. Yazaki North America is part of the Yazaki Group. Yazaki Group is an independent automotive component manufacturer founded in Japan in 1941. We put our resources to work for a specific purpose to help our customers achieve success, defined by an unyielding commitment to the success of our customers. Yazaki has become a valued supplier to virtually every major automotive manufacturer in the world. Our customer-centric focus guides in the global manufacturing footprint, allowing us to deliver the right products in the right quantities at the right time, anywhere in the world. As a result of long-term collaboration with our customers, Yazaki has become a leader in research, development, and delivery of vehicle power and data solutions. Next page, please. So back in 1962, we started business in the US by selling Christmas lights to Sears Roebuck. Today, we have over 78,000 employees in North and Central America, spread across 6 countries. This includes more than 18,000 employees in the Central America. Next page, please. So we primarily design and build wire harnesses, electrical distribution systems, and human-machine interface systems for the transportation industry, including the emerging EV sector. We also provide energy systems and telematics business to the customer. We are exploring new business areas too. Next page, please. Earlier this year, we announced the plans to open Guatemala's first automotive technology manufacturing site. We are investing $10 million and plan to hire 1,000 people at this pilot site. Its location will allow us to quickly move our products to customer sites and provide a better option for business continuity compared to Southeast Asia, where production currently located. Longer term, Yazaki intends to invest an additional $110 million and hire over 14,000 new employees in Guatemala and El Salvador by the end of 2026. Next page, please. So we continue to invest in the region for several reasons. First, our production is labor intensive, and Central America and the Caribbean workforce are growing and eager to improve their economic status. Second, ongoing global disruption has provided the business case for us to nearshore our production from the overseas countries to this region. This will help ensure we can meet our non-time delivery commitment to our customer in North America. Third, we see opportunities to further develop our energy services and then telematics business in these countries. Fourth, the use of hydropower and other renewable energy sources fit into the goal of the net zero carbon emission. Next page, please. So finally, but most important thing is our company philosophy matches the shared objectives of the call to action to address the root of cause of irregular migration into the US. In fact, in June 2022, Yazaki became an official partner of the United States government to address the root cause of irregular migration. Let me highlight our philosophy, I just said, because this is an important part of our decision making. The Yazaki Group corporate policy is a cooperation in step with the world and a cooperation needed by society. And it will only be realized by responding to the trust and needs of a global society. And it will only be realized by responding to the trust and needs for the, and it will be only realized by the responding to the trust and needs of our global society. In implementing our fundamental management policy, we will listen to the voices of our stakeholders and reflect them in our business activities. Our goal is to contribute to the sustainable development of the earth and society, and we will encourage our business partner to support this policy and work together with us for its achievement. This is all I have for today, considering the time slot assigned. And if you have any questions and comments, I'm more than happy to welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to present our activities. Back to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Motobayashi. And now let's turn to Jonathan Casey.
It's great to be here, everyone. And I represent Nisha Medical Technologies as the CIO. And at Nisha, we have a global footprint worldwide. But more specifically, our medical technologies environment has been one we've invested in over several decades. And fundamentally, our business in medical technologies is in North America and Europe. But to give you a review of who Nisha Medical Technologies is, we can go to the next slide. We're about a $2 billion worldwide organization with 5,600 employees, with many manufacturing capabilities centered around printing, coating, laminating, converting, and molding. And those have been expanded over many years, as well as our global footprint. So integration from a growth perspective here at Nisha means thinking globally, but acting locally. We've heard from many of the other panelists today about environmental, social, and corporate issues and investment in the Central and Latin America, Caribbean region. And if we look at our business on the next slide, we could see that we play not only in medical technologies and devices for minimally invasive surgeries, but we also are in the IT devices, touch and force sensor business, as well as industrial and automotive materials, and now sustainable molded products and packaging. So our investment, we also like to look at not only access to raw materials and capabilities, but at Nisha, we look at investment in our people. Next slide, please. A lot of the medical technologies, our customers and our people are located across North America and Europe. And our nearshore production and clean room space is located in a strategic investment in a free trade zone in San Pedro in the southeast of the Dominican Republic. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, people are at the core of our investment strategy. And when we evaluated as Nisha where we were going to expand for clean room production technologies, we evaluated many Latin American countries, and the Dominican popped out. The access to very skilled labor and growing labor, as well as passionate people, really met the needs of Nisha and our continued growth in the region. Next slide, please. Our nearshore production facility is quite a pleasurable environment, and everyone comes to work with a smile on their face. We've grown from starting at 30 individuals to now close to 500 people in our Dominican site. Our expansion takes us to a 3-campus location with dedicated program management and doing medical line transfers for some of the largest medical device OEMs in the world as a CDMO operating in the Dominican Republic. That history has been a long-term investment in brownfield redevelopment in the region, as well as looking at continuing education for our people and promotions from within. Next slide, please. Our timeline started when we evaluated where to invest for semi-automated and manual assembly for surgical devices that go through the sterilization pathway back in 2005, getting through FDA audits and inspections, and expanding our clean room production from Class 7 and Class 8 clean rooms to now our 3rd facility on the campus, adding another 25,000 square foot in clean room assembly. Our production continues to grow in the region, as well as our investment in the people. And as part of Nisha Medical Technologies and Nisha Limited's sustainable development goals, we believe in the founding principles set worldwide, are 17 founding principles behind environment, sustainability, and governance. Next slide, please. Giving back is just one element, and that comes through education, environment, and social programs. So our Nisha EcoSense philosophy really centers around our building a better future in the communities that we serve. And you can see here, hurricanes and other areas of disaster can occur in the regions we all operate. We've heard about those today. And so we mobilize our people, not just centered around products and our customers, but also around the society and our environment. So we're really pleased with our investment strategy over the past 15 years in the Dominican Republic, our partnership with the government locally, as well as our steadfast workforce and access to educated, very driven and passionate Nisha people has created an opportunity poised for growth. So we're very excited and bullish on continued investment in the Caribbean as Nisha. Thank you.
Apologies. Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Jonathan. That was extremely helpful. And again, giving us a sense of how Japan's private sector is engaging in these regions. Before we turn to questions and answers, just a reminder to send any questions you might have, either for specific panelists or for the group as a whole, through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, or by emailing them to meetings@thedialogue.org. That's meetings with an S. We already have a number of questions in the Q&A, and so if you will allow me, I'll direct some of those to the group as a whole, or to specific participants. We have one specifically for Ms. Kobayashi, for Director General Kobayashi, but I would like to, I think a number of you could probably address this question. It is from Chang Yuting of the Pan American Development Foundation, who would like our panelists to elaborate a bit more on the extent to which Japanese companies view investment in the Caribbean and in Central America as challenging, and if so, why? Obviously, there are a couple of examples here of very successful engagement, and others have been mentioned by our speakers, but what obstacles, in other words, would need to be overcome to ensure more in the way of a private sector engagement. And then Yuting goes on to mention that, or ask whether there are certain industries, aside obviously from those that have already been mentioned, that the Japanese companies are interested in, apart from the ones that have been mentioned. So let me turn that. I don't know, Director General Kobayashi, if you'd like to start with that, since it was directed toward you, but then I'd love to hear from other participants as well, if you're so willing. Well, and I don't know if the Director General may have jumped off, but I don't know, Mr. Sakaguchi, is that something that you could? Certainly there are plenty of examples of public-private partnerships between, and you indeed indicated some of those, between JICA and a number of different Japanese companies. Could you elaborate a bit on the extent to which Japanese companies have been interested in engaging in these two regions, and indeed the range of sectors that have been of interest?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, there is several. So two things I would like to mention. So there is several modalities that we can work together with the private companies, and in the JICA's case, is we can work together with a Japanese company for the development survey studies in the recipient countries, target country or partner countries. For example, if the agriculture private company would like to work in Central American country or the Caribbean countries, the Japanese company can propose the project to JICA, and if the project will be approved, and the private company and JICA working together with partner country to find the possibility of the business in the the partner country, for example, Guatemala. Currently, we work in the Central American Caribbean region, many activities in Mexico. So a number of Japanese companies have interest to work in Mexico. So we are implementing several PPP development studies service in Mexico. And apart from that, we have the project in Honduras. That is a solid waste management project, if my understanding is correct. And agriculture sector in Guatemala, we are working together with Japanese firms. So apart from the renewable energy, there is several, the climate change, solid waste management, agriculture, and health also. Yeah. So there is a several possibility, I think. Thank you.
Certainly, that makes good sense. Let me turn the question to also our colleagues at Yazaki and Nisha. Are there certain obstacles that you see to expanding your business in these regions, and what might be done to overcome those? Certainly, what you are doing, the work you've been doing is well established, and in many cases extensive. But what more can be done? And I'll go to Yazaki first, if you don't mind. And we have, please, Meta.
Yeah, good morning, Margaret, and thank you for the opportunity. So from a Yazaki perspective, as Elvis explained in his presentation, we do have a rather large footprint in Central Americas, even outside of Mexico, where we really have a significant footprint in that particular country. Considering the nature of our product, which is very labor intensive, the stability of the workforce and the quality of the output is extremely important to us. So we do desire and look very closely for that. We are blessed to have it, I would say, in most all of the countries that we operate in Central Americas. The other key factor that impacts our business is the stability of the supply chain. Our product is extremely complex. To give you a quick perspective, what we call a wire harness system for one particular automobile could have anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 different components that forms that one system for one car or one vehicle. Any one component not being there at the right time can shut our production down, can effectively shut our customer down, and that is something we cannot afford. So having the stability in the supply chain, having the right infrastructure, working with the public-private partnerships together with the government entities is extremely critical for us to be able to be successful in delivering what we take pride in from a Yazaki standpoint. That's what I would comment on that particular question.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, anything to add?
Sure, I would echo all the points that Yazaki has mentioned, supply chain and the stability and knowledge in the workforce, and add to that, looking for areas where there's knowledge economy. There's no problem operating where our competitors are. In fact, some are customers and others are suppliers. So really building that knowledge economy within the skilled workforce is essential, as well as working with the local government on what education and further investment is needed to ensure stability of supply and infrastructure to keep our employees happy and to keep product moving with excellent quality.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We have another question here from Shaki Espejo from S&P Global. Mr. Sakaguchi, again for you, but we've already one question that he has here is, why have there been no projects approved recently in Mexico? But indeed, as you've noted, there have been a couple of initiatives, new initiatives, right? And certainly several underway in Mexico. Perhaps you might elaborate on the Mexican projects a bit more, if possible. And then, a broader question, what characteristics must projects have to be approved by JICA?
Okay, thank you very much. And I didn't explain about the project in Mexico. But we have plenty of activities project in Mexico. And we implement, especially in health sector, disaster prevention sector, and also private sector development, including the vehicles project, because Japanese car industries are very active in Mexico. So we work together with Mexican counterparts to improvement of the business environment in car industry in Mexico. So there is so many projects, and also we received more or less 80 some Mexicans to Japan per year for the co-creation program or training program. So yeah, there is plenty of opportunities, and the right characteristics of master projects have to be approved. So this is not the easy question, but we have the kind of the development policy for each country. So this is defined by so Japanese government and JICA. So and we have the since we have the such kind of the policy, and so the meets the development policy is the one of the indispensable thing. For example, which country? So El Salvador, we have the Eastern Region Development, Health and Education Program, and we have Disaster Prevention Program and Regional Cooperation Program. So the project have to be a match at least one of the development policy or our program. So this is the one thing, and there are several other elements that we analyze or we evaluate each proposal. But the important thing is the dialogue. So we all the project we dialogue with counterparts and we formulate together, and so we brush up the concept of the project. So if you have any ideas about the project, so please communicate to our representative offices in each country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A question for Mark Lopez. And possibly also, I know Director General Kobayashi, you're having some technical difficulties, but if you're able to just stick with us for this one, you know, what kinds of, a few of these were mentioned, but what specific financial tools, you know, are being used by the US government and the Japanese government to promote and support investment in Central America specifically? Are there specific programs or grants or low-cost loans to support these investments? Some of this was mentioned, but perhaps you could elaborate. And I know, Mr. Sakaguchi, we're relying on you heavily here too. If you have anything to add, obviously, as a JICA representative, please feel free to do so. Perhaps we can start with Mark, and Mark may have, did we lose Mark? Well, perhaps we'll start with Director General Kobayashi in this.
Regarding to support investment by Japanese companies, there are the so-called Japanese Bank for Investment Corporation, JBIC, and JBIC has been having a cooperation with KABEI as well. I am not here with some specific examples, but if the companies are interested in certain areas of investment, JBIC is usually helpful for financial support as well.
Fantastic. Anything to add, Mr. Sakaguchi, to that? And then
no, at this moment, no, Alicia.
Yes,
thank you very much.
If Mark jumps back on, we'll give him that question again. One comment from the Executive Vice President of the Dominican Free Trade Zones Association about NISHA's commitment to excellence and employee welfare. He notes, or she notes, that they are glad to know about this expansion project, and that the country will benefit significantly from the social economic development that it may bring about. So very congratulations to you on being well received by that particular institution. We have another from Agnieszka Sternik of the ACNUR. For Mr. Sakaguchi, but I imagine again that we might have some additional participants who can comment on this. Could you please share more information about any migration-related initiatives in Central America in cooperation with the US? And ideally, we'll have Mark Lopez jump on here again and can ask him that particular question too. But you mentioned this in your final slide. Is there anything more you can say about it?
Okay, so 2021, the April, so President Biden and Prime Minister Suga was agreed to work together in these root causes of the immigration in Central American region, especially in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, these Northern Triangle countries. But Mexico, since all the land immigrants go through the Mexico, so Mexico also eligible. And actually, in JICA, we have the staff in UNHCR, and we already discussed about some possibility to working together in Mexico. And next week, I think next week, we will have the one, the kind of the kickoff discussion with UNHCR. So I hope Agnieszka-san can join our kickoff meeting, and I hope this program with UNHCR can be some the concrete activity in the future. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you so much. A question for Ayesha, and indeed anyone else who would like to respond. Climate change and net zero efforts are increasingly important in the Caribbean and indeed in globally. How do you see Japan's role in providing access to clean energy in the Caribbean? Are there prospects for enhanced collaboration in that particular sense? You've talked a lot about a lot of the other work that you are doing, and indeed Japan is involved in. But what about this particular aspect? And what are the prospects for continued collaboration in this sense?
Yeah, thank you. I believe there definitely are a few opportunities to expand on the partnership around renewables, around technologies that are more environmentally friendly. In responding or contributing just a tiny bit to one of the earlier questions about challenges for investment, I would add that in the Caribbean or parts of the Caribbean, one of the challenge potentially for investors is a high cost of energy. And so that's also a factor, that investors have to contend with, and maybe a deciding factor for countries like Jamaica when investors consider going to Jamaica, because the cost of energy is quite high. And at the moment, we do not have extensive uptake of renewable energy. The use of, solar panels at home and that kind of thing are not standard. And that's because we do not have a policy that fully supports that across the region, or at least at the country level. In terms of the specific opportunities, again, just going back to the matter of vehicles and electric vehicles in particular, certainly that's an avenue for exploration in the Caribbean. I know some countries have recently developed EV policies where they're speaking to, how this process will unfold, who they're partnering with, how it will look on the ground, what opportunities are there for investments as well in EV technology in the region. And again, just bearing in mind a comment that was made in the private conversation we had earlier by Mark Jarrett was that one of the concerns that some of the stakeholders have is that there will be increased dumping of ICE vehicles in the region, right? And so we want to ensure that, in moving forward in the context of the just transition and fossil fuel phase out, that we have agreements and arrangements with Japan that allow for new technologies, renewable technology vehicles to be accessible to Caribbean nationals, and which is why I said earlier, pro-port technologies. At the moment, we see where many of the EVs that have been developed are very expensive, and so the average householder will not be able to afford this. And so, how do we, in light of these realities, develop technologies that are affordable and accessible to the average person? And there are a range of variations across the Caribbean. So in Antigua and Barbuda, where I currently live, for example, backup energy is a huge thing. So most households have what we call a generator because the grids are unstable. And so it presents another opportunity as well for backup energy systems that use renewable energy, can store, you can feed to the household even when in times of instability in the grid, because at the moment the generators that are used use fossil fuels. They're driven by fossil fuels, and they too tend to be unstable. And what it means is that poorer households cannot access this, right? So bearing that in mind as well, an opportunity for developing technologies, backup energy systems based on renewable energy. And then there are parts across the Caribbean countries where geothermal energy is available. So in countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, in countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, how do potential investors tap into this opportunity to invest in geothermal energy, which is an opportunity in some areas of the Caribbean. So I believe that, those are areas of potential exploration in light of the transition that our countries are trying to make, and areas where, again, Japan certainly has the expertise to support in the region.
Terrific. And indeed, some areas where Japan has been heavily involved in parts of these regions. So that's fantastic to know. Thank you so much. It's exceptionally helpful insight. A question for Yazaki and for Nisha. What do you make of what has been a maybe more than a year or two push now, certainly, but ongoing for nearshoring of production of materials related to national security or just critical technologies and production capability in Central America in particular, but in other parts of the region as well. Do you see much progress in this respect? Do you feel that Japanese companies, or your companies in particular, may stand to benefit from this push, or from related regulation or other opportunities associated? And we can start perhaps with Jonathan.
Sure, I'd be happy to address that, Margaret. Prior to any policies or government regulations, medical technologies are essential, even during the COVID pandemic. So being an essential business and continuing production with stability of supply was critical. But at the core, we believed in what I'll coin globalization, thinking globally, but acting locally. The closer we can position our production locations to actual consumption, the more sustainable and the faster we can respond to our global customers and hospitals. So this has always been a push here at Nisha. Nearshoring, we have operations all across Latin America and Central America in our automotive and devices business, but for medical technologies, focused on global production as close as we can to where the demand is essential. So prior to any policy push, this has been an internal initiative as well, and we continue to advance our production footprint in this way.
Yazaki.
Yeah. So, Margaret, from our perspective, to some degree, I would echo what Jonathan said, although our industry, our product line is significantly different from what they do, but to some degree, it's all tied together. And in specific to answering your question, what we deal with today is not sensitive from a national security perspective or from a strictly proprietary confidentiality type situation. We do work very closely with our customers whenever we talk about nearshoring, because any change in our footprint and our supply chain has to be done in partnership with our OEM customers, at times with our supply chain partners, so that the whole ecosystem can sort of holistically move together. Because as I explained earlier in one of the previous questions, our supply chain is quite complex, and any piece falling out of that cadence sort of creates a lot of complications, which at the end of the day, nobody wants to deal with, in all honesty. Now, with that said, as we expand our different areas of business interests, We potentially feel that we might be getting into some of those sensitive areas down the road in future, where we will need to pursue the right certifications, right approvals from the right authorities. There are some restrictions when we talk about um, particular technologies that they have to be locally produced within the boundaries of United States. Even bringing them product from overseas as close as Mexico or Honduras or Guatemala or any of those countries requires special steps and special certifications. So depending on the business need, depending on how things evolve, we will be pursuing it. At the end of the day, like Elvis explained, right, we are a corporation in step with the world, and we want to be part of the communities that we work in. So we will do what is necessary to grow our business, but we will do it the right way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, actually, that what Manish is explained, that I just wanted to make some compliment on. I think I briefly explained that we went to the country of the Nicaragua and El Salvador, and then also the Guatemala. And then, of course, that the original the reason why we are penetrate into those countries is for the wire harness and then try to make a smooth supply chain. But the thing now we are looking for is more like how to develop a better and good relationship with a country. We call it the B2C or B2 country. How to grow together and then try to make our business together with the country. That's a part of the strategy we have for now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Rebecca Bill Chavez has very kindly offered, because we did unfortunately lose connection with Mark Lopez, to maybe offer some thoughts on some of the questions that were, one or two of the questions that were directed to him. Rebecca, do you mind?
Sure. Yes. And first of all, I just want to thank everyone again for being here. I learned so much from the panelists, and it was really helpful for me to hear some of the concrete examples when it comes to the role of the Japanese public and the private sector in addressing the development needs of Central America and the Caribbean. So thank you very much. I just wanted to, I'll just say that I worked closely with Mark Lopez during the Obama administration, and at the time we had a Central America strategy, but we did not have anything like the Partnership for Central America. So I think when it comes to lessons learned from the Obama administration Central America strategy, the role of the Partnership for Central America is really key. And I know he mentioned this, but I think the fact that it's separate from government, yet can partner with the U.S. government is really important. That we have this, the PCA is indeed separate from the government. And there was a question, I believe, about some of the concrete initiatives. And I think that, the first thing I'd say is one of the things that Mark and his team are doing is they're really mobilizing big ideas, and they're addressing some of the challenges. I know Aisha was talking about Central America, but the issue of remittances and climate and gender, those are all initiatives. There are initiatives within the Partnership for Central America to address that. And I think one example would be the crop insurance policy, set of policies that they're implementing. Another one is on remittances and financial inclusion. I think the trick now is going to be how to scale some of these successful projects that have been implemented on a small scale. So I'll leave it at that. And Aisha, I look forward to connecting with you separately about gender and climate, because it's an issue that we're working on here.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate that. Let's now turn, we're rapidly approaching the end of the session. And so allow me to turn the floor to Ambassador Yamada for some very brief closing remarks.
Thank you. Japan has been supporting the economic development of the Central American region since above all the 1980s in order to bring about the consolidation of peace and democracy in the region. In the Caribbean, Japan has also strengthened cooperation, especially since the first Japan CARICOM summit in 2014, attended by late Prime Minister Abe, and our cooperation is enhancing. Meanwhile, the presence of Japanese companies in Central America and the Caribbean is still small, but some companies are expanding their activities dynamically in the region, as shown in today's presentation. Yazaki and Nisha are really excellent pioneers in this area, so I hope that many Japanese companies follow this excellent success. When the Japanese government considers cooperation with Central America and the Caribbean, Japan always considers the possibility of co-working or coordination with the United States, an important player of the region. For Japan's cooperation for action to tackle with the root causes of undocumented immigration is the one good example. Also, when Japanese firms consider investing in these countries, they will take into account the US market and the supply chain. So given these factors, I think there is room for Japan and the United States to cooperate even more and contribute to the development of Central America and the Caribbean. What will be important for the future development of Central America and the Caribbean in each country? On the political front, good governance and decent government based on the rule of law with little corruption will be important. On the economic front, I think it is important to improve business environment, investment environment, and promote regional integration. In this sense, the role of regional organization is also important. Good policies taken by government will attract investment from countries outside the region, including Japan and the United States, and expand trade. And to end my remarks, on behalf of the JALAC, as a co-sponsor of today's event, I would like to express our gratitude to all the speakers and excellent moderator Margaret. And I would like to also express our hope for the future development of the Central America and the Caribbean region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And Michael, some final words?
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret. And I want to, first of all, just thank you for your outstanding, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody, for your outstanding intellectual leadership and direction of this valuable initiative. The JLAC Dialogue Partnership, which I have been privileged to be part of over the last 8 years, I think has been of enormous value. And until this meeting, our efforts have focused largely on the region as a whole. But we're really delighted in this meeting to be making the case now for more serious attention paid to the Caribbean and Central America, as well as for generating creative solutions, platforms, and partnerships in support of development opportunities and challenges. It's clear, listening to the discussion today, that Japanese engagement has been longstanding, sustained, positive, and largely overlooked. So I think this was a real opportunity to bring visibility and recognition that the Japanese role in the region merits. The challenges going forward are many. I think a more of a strategic emphasis on priorities to achieve maximum impact in the region. Perhaps climate collaboration was mentioned, or food security. But I think the strategic thinking is obviously very important to have the greatest effect possible. There is a leadership transition going on at the Inter-American Development Bank. Several people mentioned the bank and the role of Japan in the bank. This is an opportunity, I think, to identify priorities and develop an agenda that, together with the Inter-American Development Bank. And finally, Central America, we know, is very troubled, and external actors are fundamental, the US and Japan and other external actors. But I think we can agree that to produce the most sustainable outcomes, national actors in all of these countries, in public, private sectors, as well as civil society, will need to focus on strengthening governance and the rule of law in their countries. And I think in that way, all of the things that have been discussed this morning will have greater impact throughout the society. So to conclude, I just want to thank everybody for their very thoughtful contributions, to what I thought was a very rich and productive discussion. And we look forward to future meetings in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you again, Ambassador Yamato, for the exceedingly valuable closing remarks, and another very big thanks to our partner, JICA, in the coordination and execution of this important meeting, and also, of course, to our sponsors. Wishing you all a wonderful day or night, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you again at these meetings. Take care.